So let's put it into full screen. It's a web browser-based application, so this is in Chrome. And we have all of our projects in a dashboard. So if I wanted to search for office projects that we've worked on, we can see all of our office projects. And if I just want to use an example project to show you, each project has the plan, the scope, and what we call the flow. These are individual modules that could be completely independently used. So if you wanted to create a plan, but not interested in the scoping, not interested in the project management and the lean perspective, people do use it just for that. And also we have some people that just print cards and use the flow module on its own. So if we open this project, the example as a template, and then we'll see certain project information. I won't bore you with sort of settings, but you can create a team. And then each one of these is a plan section that can be collaborated on, to approve, to edit, to have comments on, to get edited, and then get approved. And if I look on the left-hand side, as we saw before, so maybe we have a mission statement, maybe one of our BIM uses is disaster planning, and maybe we are looking for existing conditions modeling, and you can also see here we've got embedded video. So this is all content that can be used to create a plan. We'll go into it in a lot more detail. The scope is the grid that we saw before, and you can see that we have a set of the scope down the left-hand side, and then the images in the center. Each one of these is totally flexible, so if we wanted to follow standards, that's great. If we didn't, then we could have special conditions to be able to do that. And I'll go into that in a lot more detail. And then the flow is our page full of the responsibilities, the cards, that we can drag and drop into certain progress, certain columns, and filter out and print as we go through. So just to give you kind of an overview, but we'll start a new project from scratch and show you how to build something up and how you can use a library of content to be able to do that. So let's cool. What would you like to create?
Education.
With the BIM manager?
Yeah.
Okay. Would you like to do the demonstration? Actually, what's the address of the building that we're in?
K3.
K?
29.
29.
The second one, second pick.
Nice. So we can define a specific location, whether it's a road map or a satellite. We can even place the man down and have a street view. Integration to make it easier rather than copying and pasting from other tools. We can add an image, and we'll go into the details. We can add team members, and we can start either adding from our standards, and whether that's an industry standard, a company standard, or your standard for a specific project that you work on, project type, or you might work with a consultant that has standards that they've shared with you as well. So it depends on where you're working or how you're working. Or you might want to create something from scratch. It might be that you want to put standards into your application as well. So we start by defining what type, whether this is a process, and it's something, let's call this the coordination process. We can add a description, and we can add a bunch of different things, tables, text, etc., what you would expect. An iframe of a model, a video, for example, so maybe let's do that. just to show you if we do videos. Anything that
Not
okay. So I'm just going to copy the YouTube link and I'm going to go and embed a video. By pasting the link, you can add a video by uploading it as well, and we get content. So without going into too much detail, I can also let's add some tables in here, just so that you've got some content, and color some cells, put some headers on, etc. You get the idea.
okay.
And when we save it, it saves. So now we've got this section and its coordination process on the left-hand side. Pretty simple. Fully editable, but you're not going to do that every time. You're going to want to use your standards. Let me just maximize this. And instead of creating a new section, we're going to add it from our standards. And that could be something you've created before, which would appear in My Plan sections, a project that you're involved with, or something from the global community that somebody else has shared. In this tab on projects, we have an example project that we can grab, but you might have any other project that you worked on that you want to bring in something from. We can choose which ones we want to by selecting them. So this is file naming, where file naming, quality control process, etc. You can see all of these. I can add them independently, or I can just grab a whole bunch of them. Go to page 2 here, and I'm just going to grab a couple more of these. So we've got a whole bunch, and all of the contract terms and everything. So you can see quickly kind of creating embedded videos, our BIM use table, so being able to go through a list of all of the potential BIM uses, agree on that. It's this type of template that helps to expedite workflows and standardize work processes. Might be something that you would have company-wide, it might be something, so software versions. Obviously for BIM planning, we would have LOD Planner. I'm glad that you don't think that that's a joke. And then a quality control process, contract terms, you can have attachments added. It's a very versatile system, signatures at the bottom. So the planning process can also be collaborative by adding team members, and they can contribute to it, whether they're editors or whether they are project managers, or they can just be viewers. So instead of having to send a file to somebody, they can be added as a viewer, not being able to edit anything, but they might want to play the video, or they might want to comment on something to get approval. That's a workflow-based approach. Any questions on the plan? Nope. Pretty simple. So let's go to the scope. And the first thing in the scope would be for us to understand which milestones we might be wanting to work on. Or we could add something from a template which brings in the milestones, essentially the phases or the stages of work that we're going to go through. Or we could create from scratch in the same way as we were in the plan. So to expedite our workflow, I'm going to add something that will bring in certain milestones. Actually, let me add some milestones quickly from some templates. And actually, no, let me...
Can you show the standards? Possible to choose?
Yeah. So in the project settings, on the dashboard, in the account settings, I can choose whichever standard I would like to follow. Currently we're set to combine essentially the LOD and LOA standards so that we get the as-built scale. So it really enhances the LOD 500 concept, but you can choose whichever one you want to. Let's go back to the standard and go back to our project. And I'm going to create a new scope to show you how simple it is to do it from scratch. And I'm just going to call this an example scope. Choose when it is, let's call it a construction scope. And you can see this is a library of all of the systems and elements that you might be wanting to manage. Somebody said earlier about some site stuff, some civil stuff, so we've got, let me zoom in my browser as well, you can see it a lot better. So this is all content that you can choose from, and you can also request more as well. So our team is continually adding to this based on user requirements. What do we want to create? Any takers? Does it matter? Okay, I like this one, excavation support, because it's quite detailed, some structural steel, some vertical, and some concrete that everyone can identify. Oh, maybe I should add some pipes and things like that too as well. So let's edit that and add. We search for anything with pipes. So let's add HVAC and ventilation. I've just defined an example scope package and the set of scope for that scope package. And if I then want to, I can define some milestones and then start adding requirements in each of the milestones. It would create a grid, and I can then click to add things. So, milestones, would you like to just define milestones, or would you like to have them from a previous project that you've worked on? You can just grab them from a previous project, or from a standard. And for example, in the UK, they follow the REBA stages, but if you follow a different set, that can also be part of the standard in here as well. Let me use that, and then I can use another example to show you how that works. So I'm going to remove a couple of these, define those. Now we've got a set of milestones, we've got the grid beneath, and we can start to define when we're going to create content for each of these. Would be a collaborative meeting. We would say, okay, we're going to maybe start here, and it's going to add that as a requirement, and maybe we will increase the detail, so as each time we hit the increase button, it increases. If I want to open this up, I can open it to show. I can then start to decide which elements that we actually want to include. So, do we want to include each one of these, yes or no? We want the whalers in here, yes or no? Cribbing, yes or no? Rakers, yes or no? So each one of these is an individual component we can turn on and off. We can also define more additional requirements for each of these items if we wanted to. Information requirements, specifically everything from, whether you want warranty for something like this, probably wouldn't, but if there are IFC parameters, for example, that you might want, it will find anything in the library, so you can go into more detail if you would like to. Each one of these is created and completely editable and then completely reportable. But if we've done something before that we can just bring in, when we hit add, I can choose one of these. This is a completed example, and when I hit add, it will add this as a scope package. And you'll see all of the images populate. So now we can see what the requirements are for each of these stages in the design process, and what elements are required, and who is responsible for those, and very clear requirements. I can go into a lot more detail on here, but I'll move to the scope, the flow, to understand what we have as a starting point, the set of elements in our backlog. The situation here is you don't have to create this as a set of cards, it's just part of your original scope. It's already been assigned to the relevant parties. And we can merely say, I would like to, for our construction milestone, print those as the cards so that we could use them in our in-person workflow. Here it creates with the assignment, responsibilities, and the images. We can have a collaborative session with those. Go back. And then we start updating who is responsible. So unfortunately, I'm the only person in the project at the moment, so I have to be responsible for this. What the dates are that we're going to be requiring it. What the checklist items are based on what I need from somebody else or what I need to do in order to complete this activity, add attachments, links, etc. And then I can status this based on what column it's in, full control, adding additional columns to be able to understand other responsibilities and so on. Everything in the system can also be created as a PDF. So the flow cards that we created when we hit the print button is stored in our documents. And if we wanted to create a contract, it would be with everything that we have in here at the moment. If we wanted to create with a cover page, and maybe a nice image, or I don't know whether I can find a nice image, so that's our boring cover page, and create a header. And maybe I can find a logo. Oh. Depends on where you are. Add apron. And so what this is going to do is collect all of the plan, scope, and detailed information requirements, which actually we didn't, we added some that might have been part of the previous scope that we added. So this will create as a document, it will archive it, and we can share that with others. With our cover page, and who's involved in the project team, and all of our requirements that we created, all of the other detailed requirements for everything in the project. The signature page, the very simple scope that we created, and the detailed requirements. And some of those detailed requirements for handover had information requirements on them as well. Really quick and powerful way to plan the processes, the BIM uses, and the team involved, what the requirements are. Define the scope that's required for each of those BIM uses. I maybe didn't detail that enough, but this really maybe couldn't, not just construction, maybe this is the coordination milestone. And for that coordination milestone, we would need, that makes it easier. So we have a coordination milestone. I can say, okay, I would like to add this requirement, or I need this requirement here, and drag these around. This is the set of requirements for that BIM use. And we have defined them in detail. So if we turn on the detail level of element 4, let's just turn off the ones that are not used. So you can see how we are able to, where maybe we do or don't want something, turn these on and off in the cells, and you can see the grid update here. As I turn them off, they disappear. We can see them disappearing on the screen at the top. We can, in a meeting, we've seen it in 45 minutes. The team has clearly defined their scope, and everybody understands exactly what they're required to do at what point in time, and they are so much happier as a result, because they have a clear identification of what the requirements are. And then the backlog becomes a list of tasks that we can print, and as we print those, we can then run a collaborative session in person to understand the sequence, so that we get the priority of the elements, and then we get a much better, higher quality model without the pipe routing around the cable tray as a result. So that's each one of those modules. I could go into a lot more detail. Maybe there's questions and I can answer those questions as we go. But collaborating with a cloud-based plan that is dedicated for BIM, we've seen some incredible results. So I'd love to see whether that might be something be useful on a project that you're working on as well. Nestas is the man and the team to see locally.